Hi, welcome to Collaborwocky 14. Collaborwocky is Modus Institute and Modus Cooperandi's conversations about collaboration. And this time we're talking to Dan Eberle. Dan is an Agile coach and he is a screenwriter and producer and actor. He does a lot of things. And he's going to talk to us about his Obeya for film shoots. So, evolving, creative, difficult projects done with a team of people on very tight deadlines. Dan, did you want to introduce yourself a bit before we get started?
Sure. So my name is Dan Eberle. I am a film producer, as well as an actor and writer. And then I also am an Agile coach. And so one of the cool things that I do is I use lean and Agile tools to help aid in creating art, as well as business. So I have a foot in both rooms.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dan. I'm pretty stoked about this one. So Dan is one of our Lean Agile Visual Management LAVM scholars, who, as he said, he is likewise a creative. He's likewise an actor. And he had shared that he was using an Obeya for some of his projects. Now, for those of you who might not have caught our last Collaborwocky, and Obeya is Japanese for big room. It's a tool that is fundamental to lean thinking and continuous improvement. Essentially, it's a dedicated room or location, especially since COVID. It's quite often something that utilizes an online tool like iObeya or Miro or Mural, where you have work and data and documents and metrics and relationships and communication and plans and obstacles and all those kinds of things that help teams make decisions and problem solve and normalize expectations so that shared understanding, shared problem solving, shared decision making, and momentum towards goals can regularly occur. So as I said, this is usually a tool that you see a lot in office spaces, and Dan had implemented it in a really cool context. And maybe Dan, you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So one of the things that is kind of unique about sort of the modern kind of agile way of working that is not particularly unique to those of us that have ever done anything creative is this notion of kind of leveraging the creativity of the people around you, the input of the people around you, and it's kind of a mix of trying to find efficiency and that sort of thing operationally, but also trying to discover and uncover potential in solving either creative problems or just creating something new. So this is sort of like one of the things that is a little bit different about the arts than business is that, depending on your definition of art exists for its own sake. So we have the luxury of kind of subordinating to that as opposed to just trying to do what's cost effective or something like that. That said, I'm an independent filmmaker, so we have some pretty serious constraints in terms of the time and the money that we have to work with and things like that. So a lot of these lean and agile tools that we study in the LAVM program and that have existed, probably predating most of us, if not just me, is that these things really do catalyze a more constructive kind of conversation. So just to kind of show you guys what I'm talking about here, I'm going to go off script a bit, and I'm going to show you all just some examples of kind of what, not that people don't know what a film set looks like, but this is sort of an example of kind of the type of situation that we're dealing with. So this is like what the shop floor looks like on our set. So this is this is a nice designed set. We got lights and stuff everywhere. What you don't really see is all of the people everywhere, but outside of the frame right now, or literally behind this wall, that are toiling about and desperately trying to prepare for what's next, and to understand what is happening now and to correct the things that are not necessarily going that well. And so, so we're in a state of frantic activity. And one of the things that's really tricky about real-time anything is it's very hard to stay aligned. So making a movie, making an album, making software, trying to deliver a marketing program, whatever it is that you're doing, human beings have a very, very hard time staying aligned. So, there are some simple sort of elemental tools that we can use to help us do that. And I will just say that our Obeya really evolved over time. So the most basic element to any kind of project that most people, even the most basic kind of agile type person or even non-agile person is aware of is something like this. This is your basic Kanban. And this is, for us, this is our little portfolio Kanban. This basically is the highest level Kanban that we have. This is our highest level visualization. And basically what this does is this helps us know kind of, what we haven't done yet, kind of what state of readiness the next things are. And then right now we're on a hiatus, but normally this would, have some activity in this sort of activity queue area over here. And then we talk about maybe what we have finished recently. Over here, you can kind of get a sense. We've been actually shooting off and on for the last 9 months. So we have all kinds of things that we have done, and we can have sort of a visual retrospective that tells us like, this is the stuff that we've done. And we can talk about how it went or whatnot. Obviously, there's a lot of potential that we haven't grabbed onto here. But the purpose of all of this is really just on a high level, somebody can come up to this board, and and anyone involved in the project, we write these little stickies in a very human readable way where people can just understand what the heck we're talking about. That way, when we're having a conversation about what's next or what just occurred, we are talking about what is next and not just trying to bring each other up to speed. So that's like the most basic benefit as I see it, to having a visualization, a really basic visualization like this. Now, that said, it really doesn't do the trick all by itself. As Jim and Tonianne say frequently, every kind of team probably needs more than one visualization, and that is absolutely true. Just to kind of give you a sense of what it looks like on set, I have sort of an early version of our on-set Obeya, which kind of looks like, let's see if we can find the most embarrassing one. This is what our earliest kind of hacked together on-set Kanban looked like. And this was the
Very
one
excited.
Yes, this was at the end of a long day. But the reason I'm showing this is as this was a direct response to the room that you saw and the other room behind that room where people were doing makeup and costumes and prepping props and prepping whatever is next. We could not stay aligned. We would have a quick huddle, we would walk away, and we would all forget what we agreed to. Even creating a simple visualization out of this cardboard box immediately lifted the anxiety level, lifted in a good way, meaning a removed anxiety from all of those people, lifted spirits is what I was going for there, and allowed people to know more about what was coming and to prepare accordingly and to just have a sense of orientation. That's what we were going for. Now, I'm going to fast forward to kind of where we landed, and I'll show the on-set Obeya because that's the more interesting one. And this is from one of the last days of shooting that we did. I'll actually just put it up here. And what this is this is sort of our little on-set control room. And so what you see here, and this isn't even really the best version of this. Actually, I have an even better one. Let's see here. This is pretty good. So what this is a little bit more dynamic. And what it's telling us, first of all, one of the most important things that we learned is that it's very important to be able to change things. Like, in other words, this version here that you saw has these sort of printed out kind of maps or plans that we make, and I'll talk you through how these work. But the idea is that we wanted to be able to refer to them, but the problem with it is that the plans constantly change because you are constantly adapting to the sort of the emergence of what is occurring on set, especially the way that we work. And so the problem with this idea, as well intended as it was that we couldn't really continually update our visualizations. It has to be easy, it has to be quick, so that we can stay aligned and so that we can know what's happening and we don't get confused. But this idea, this is just a document, right? So this is just not really acceptable. And I had a feeling it wouldn't be, but I wanted to sort of be a good empiricist and try it because our producer, Amy, had taken the time to do it. I'm like, okay, well, let's put these up and let's see how this goes. But what we found was that it really didn't quite cut it. And that it was actually a lot easier to just have some computers set up and do it that way so that we could change things. The other thing that was cool about this is that it's really like the Obeya, this is another shot of it, a wider shot, was available to anyone on set, whether you're a performer, you're in the crew, you're just our host, whoever can come up to this, have some snacks, which is very important, and check out what's going on, what's coming up, what's happening now. And then over here, you can see that we added some things. Again, very important to be able to change your visualization. So we had a sort of a done area here. This is stuff that is sort of like archived because we plan our shoots in these like chunks of time. And so we go in knowing what we want to do and how we want to do it, and then reality happens. So the idea here, though, is that we do have kind of a combination of different versions of the visualization that we can use, that we can update, and that we can all know. And what was cool is that people that weren't even necessarily responsible for sort of executing the shoot were still very interested and interested in what this was. And again, it provided some orientation that you might not otherwise have. One of the things that's true is that that filmmaking, well, we've sort of got it down really well, and we've developed techniques and ways of doing it. One of the problems with it is that it's very siloed. Now, there is sometimes value to having focus in your role. I don't want to poo-poo everything, but one of the issues with it is that there are, just like any choice that you make, there are costs associated with that. My whole thing, see, I was a jazz musician before I was ever an actor or a filmmaker, and I've always sort of been interested in lots of different art forms. And one of the things that I always found was the more experimental art forms really relied on what we would call in Agile like a T-shaped kind of attitude about having, coming to the table with a specialization or with, a particular offering, but also really reaching outside of your discipline into the disciplines of your colleagues so that you can really create some generative learning together. And in the case of art, create something really cool and new. And so having some of these boundary objects, like a Kanban, like some of the other visualizations I'll show you in a sec, allow people to really participate in a way that they wouldn't otherwise be able to or be allowed to. And that's the thing, is that there is sort of this tacit agreement, particularly in filmmaking and lots of other genres of work, that say, stay in your lane, do your thing, focus on your thing. And what we have learned many times over is that local optimization only really helps so much, and sometimes can do harm, and can also create a lot of toxicity, which is not great in terms of strengthening your enabling constraints in your little complex adaptive system of your band or your film crew or your whatever. And so creating these boundary objects give people a sense of inclusion. So when we talk about diversity and inclusion in corporate America, you know, it's not just for nice feelings. There's a huge amount of practicality to it too. Also, nice feelings are good. So anyway, so that's what it looks like on set. But there's this whole other kind of realm, which we also have available on set as well, which is sort of the amount of preparation that goes into all of this. So like I showed you, this is sort of our portfolio board. But our actual Obeya, and this is just I'll just do a super duper view, is quite crazy. It goes on, and I'll just focus on a few of these things. But this is sort of one of the things that Jim and Tonianne talk about how Miro gets out of control quickly, has a sort of suburban sprawl effect because there's no end to it. So just a quick note on how we operate is that we use sprints, but not in the sort of canonical Scrum sense. The way that we define a sprint is we say, okay, we're going to shoot these scenes. And we have sort of roughly estimated based on page count and the content of what the scenes are, it's going to take us, in this case, it's going to take 3 days. Okay. And so we'll plan probably a 4-day sprint. And that usually includes some sort of load-in day or maybe some other kind of prep day. And then we actually create a plan to deliver. And so what that looks like when we're actually prepping a sprint, first of all, before I actually get into that, I want to show you that this is the most important visualization in our Obeya. This is the entire film. So this is a visualization of every single thing that happens in the movie to the end. It's really big and long. We don't look at this very often. I mean, we refer to it from time to time when we mark things off, but this is really kind of the God's eye view of the whole project. So I should have led with that. This is really showing the narrative of kind of what our sort of focus is for the next period of time. So this probably has a little bit more utility in terms of like a work board. This is really, again, just kind of to give us a map of the overall project. Again, available to anybody. Whether they look at it or not, I cannot worry it. But anyway, so when we're planning a sprint, so we planned this sprint, the first thing that we do is we take all the cards and we kind of put them in story order. Because one of the problems with shooting film is that you shoot out of sequence. And it's very, very easy to get confused. So we create this sort of high-level sequence map of all the scenes. These aren't necessarily all the scenes in like the movie. These are just the scenes of this location. So the location is kind of the container for the sprint. And then we're going to shoot out the location as much as we can. So these are just all the scenes that we're doing. And they're sort of, these visualizations that kind of connect them may suggest different things depending on, I actually can't quite remember, but I'm pretty sure that these indicate like the same day. So it's sort of a continuity helper, but we have other ways of indicating that as well. This was probably something I did in the middle of a conversation when I was talking it over with people. But what this does allow is if and when, which is more of a when, we get confused or we're not sure what comes next in story order, we can always look at this. And so we have kind of a map that it can orient us. Over here, this was a 1 sprint shoot. And unlike a Scrum sprint where you have sort of a repeating cadence and you're trying to shove whatever you're trying to do through that whatever 2-week box, we don't really approach it that way. We're calling a sprint like this is as much time as we can afford to be in this location, or as much time as makes sense to do our thing. And so these are the things we plan to do. So we kind of plan the cards by day. This little thing down here was something that we kind of came up with on the fly. This was just kind of showing who was going to be here and when for the principal crew. But again, this is just sort of another visualization that orients us. Is more of a list, but it's good to have. And it maps directly to the scenes that are here. Now the color coding probably means something. Again, I don't remember what, but there's probably some logic to this. I try not to over process these things, and I really just try to respond to what the conversation needs to be. But in any case, people can understand what's going on typically by looking at these things. Over here, we have our pre-production Kanban, which luckily all got finished. And these are things like gathering materials and booking sound and things like that. So we have all sorts of different stuff going on here. And this is just literally so we don't forget stuff. And as we're working through it, we don't have a daily stand-up most of the time. It's usually more of a weekly thing. And then we have sort of ad hoc meetings throughout the week. But this is just this is sort of the pre-production element, and we once it's done, it's done. We don't tend to look back on this. This is a more typical film visualization. This is the overhead of the location. And what we do, I don't have any of my cute little camera icons, but the DP and other members of the crew will actually talk through shots, kind of plot out how we are going to tell the story visually. This is much more useful, in my personal opinion, than a storyboard, which tends to kind of convey too much specificity. One of the things that independent film exists for is to try things that you might not be able to do in a commercial or a TV show. And so one of the experiments with this particular location was like we were going to have the actors do a lot of improvisation, like sort of controlled improvisation. So we wanted to plot the way that we would shoot in such a way that would allow for some freedom, but also some containment and control, so that we didn't lose our day, basically. So that's another reason why we have these little. This was more of a lot more of improvisation, but normally on a different day, and I'll show you what that looks like, we might have a beat board that actually says, okay, in this scene, these are the important things that must occur. And so I have an example of that. I'll show you in a sec. Anyway, so we got an overhead to have conversations about kind of how this is going to work, what's going to happen, and where. And this is something that I actually recommend for a lot of Scrum teams that I coach. This is a kind of a day plan. So still pretty loose, and this is not legally binding, but this gives everyone involved a sense of what we plan to do, and we also change it. Very important. In fact, if we're changing it, that's a good sign. It means that we are hopefully responding effectively. But basically what this says is, this was a great, I just have to say, like, especially considering the nature of this particular sprint, because there was a lot of looseness to it. It was really important that we had a plan of, like, the actors are going to show up when. Are we going to rehearse them first or get them into costume first? These are really important things that normally we would take for granted, that really helped kind of cohere. Because one of the things that happens on film sets is people argue a lot because they misunderstand each other, because they're talking past each other and all that. So having a visualization of the plan of the day, even if we never look at it again, which we didn't not do, we kept looking at it. The fact that we looked at it once and talked about it would have been better, would have made it worth it, I guess is what I say. So anyway, so down here, we kind of have like general kind of operations. And then up here, we kind of have more sort of creative stuff that's occurring. And it just goes to show you, like, in a day that probably lasts for 12 hours, which is a very generous day for us, it's usually more like 13 or 15, it allowed us to, it really gives us a sense of our capacity, because we just barely squeaked by on these days. And that is not unusual. These little overlays that I'm getting rid of are just for illustrative purposes, but normally I would kind of gray these out so that people didn't think that we were going to do this again or something. Anyway, so you get the idea. So every day there is a plan for what's going to happen, and the plan changes. It rains, somebody's late, somebody got COVID, so the whole thing had to move. We had to book a different sound person because he popped for COVID that morning. So it was all about having a plan and having sort of the tools laid out to respond to change in an intentional way and in a collective, inclusive way. as opposed to just somebody at the top of the pyramid calling all the shots. So this is sort of like a little mini Obeya just for one sprint. And you can see it's a fair amount of stuff. This was one of the best shoot days or shoot sprints we ever had. And I think that it's because everything that we had done to this point really led up to this. We had learned so much from all of our previous mistakes. So just coming over to another day. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, there it is. So this was a way harder shoot here. We shot 2 sprints in this location that was this apartment loft, and it's big space, and there's a lot of stuff going on. We're shooting like violence, and we're shooting very dramatic exchanges, and we were in a place called Bushwick in Brooklyn, which is basically a very active industrial and kind of hipster area where there's parties all night and trucks going by all day. And there was just a lot of challenges to this shoot. So we really needed to be intentional about planning for as much as we could, but also being ready to have contingencies wherever possible. So this is the big location. We had our general sequence map, which shows all the scenes that we were doing, and there's lots of them. And then here were the days, and there's a lot of cards here. And you can kind of see that we also had these, and these are the sort of the beat boards that I was talking about. Like, we had to remember the key elements in the scene so that we made sure that we covered them adequately and that we were giving attention to the right things. So while this may feel a little micromanagey, it's actually not, because there's still a tremendous amount of emergence that occurs, even just capturing these sort of key little story points. And I mean that in the literal sense, not in the localized abstraction to confuse management sense. And so had to work that in. But in any case, so one day has, several little timelines of important beats, and we constantly referred to these. And it was really, really helpful to understand. Again, it helped to cohere the system and just keep everyone aligned on these are the main things we need to get. And then how we got them, still, there was a tremendous amount of improvisation happening in terms of the way that we were shooting it, in terms of the way that we were performing it, but it was still controlled. It was sort of that controlled chaos in some instances. And so you can see, though, that the amount of planning that goes into this is pretty significant. But still, it's for all of this, it's actually kind of not that much time. This probably represents about 10 or 15 minutes of movie time, which is very sad, but also worth it. So in any case, these visualizations are available on set. We have sort of that little area, and I'll just show you what this particular set's Obeya looked like. Let's grab it over here. And the thing about it that's funny is that there's a lot of traditional people coming from a more traditional way of making movies that I work with, and this is not traditional. This is not. I mean, there are some elements that are like the use of overheads, very standard. But like the idea of like using a Kanban, doing these sorts of things, it's like, what the hell is this thing? And there was a lot of skepticism about this and a lot of like defensiveness about it. But once we got into doing it, it became invaluable, absolutely invaluable. Because again, it was a boundary object that everyone could access, like mentally, they could all comprehend it. Let me just grab this. So this is actually one, I think Tonianne has seen this one. Here we go. So this is our producer, Amy Smith. And you can see that we've got the visualizations up. These are the printed out ones, which again, I probably wouldn't do this again, but you know, they were there. And again, this was, you know, around the snack table, over by the walkie charger, and by the coffee. So not only is it there for people if they want it, but it's sort of like, you know, you're invited. You are invited to our Obeya. Everyone is. And it was it really was a lifesaver, and it was an opportunity to really get on the same page and stay there, and not just constantly be updating each other and arguing about whatever we agreed to. So that's real utility. And it's natural that people will do that. People fall out of alignment. Human beings fall out of alignment just really fast, even ones that want to stay aligned. And so this idea of kind of augmenting our intention, our inclination, really was like rocket fuel once we got used to it and found the tools that worked for our context, which is another key thing. And why I'm glad we started with that shitty cardboard box thing, because it was like, okay, we can build complexity onto this if we need it, but let's just keep it simple. What are we doing now? What are we doing next? And what did we just do? And
so one of the things that I did want to ask you though, the story map, is that arguably the most static visualization that you have in your Obeya?
so it is, but that it still changes.
Okay, because
Yeah.
two other things related to that. You did share that your background, you also had a background in jazz, which arguably is improvisational. And you mentioned that one of the things that the Obeya does for you is that it uncovers potential. So given that you have this relatively static story map, what is the potential that your other visualizations surface that you have seen?
Well, even so when we're creating sort of the sequence map in a sprint plan, which is basically kind of a slice of the story map, depending, or I guess a set of slices, the potential that you're uncovering is an opportunity for everyone to have the same view of reality outside of our heads, and to actually opine in a qualitative way on things like structure and dynamics, and other kinds of possibilities, depending on what we're talking about. How could we capture this in a different way? And I'll just say that, you know, and I won't keep sharing visualizations, but we had some early visualizations where Amy and I were working on the script, and I wrote this thing a long time ago before the pandemic, and then it changed a lot. And the way that we were able to kind of look at whether it was going to land, or what we thought, because you don't really know, you know, you give it your best guess, was using these visualizations and visualize. Like there was one visualization that showed like mysterious parts and exciting parts, and sort of like these stretches of time. And it was just a different way to look at the material and think about it from a different angle of view. But we were also looking at it we were looking at the same thing from a different angle of view, and the power of that enabled us to have conversations that were constructive in ways that it's hard to imagine that they could otherwise happen.
Dan, thank you so much. You know, one of the things that I got out of this conversation is it further buttresses the contention that none of this is about business, none of this is about personal life, none of this is about creative life or lean or agile. It's all about giving people what they need to operate in a healthy system. You know, clarity, alignment, agency, psychological safety, and arguably visualization promotes the conversations and the relationships and the respect that we need to get that. So thank you so, so much. Now, let me ask you, if people want to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I do a little bit of consulting on the side. I do have a day job, so I'm unfortunately not available to work full time, but I'm happy to talk. If anybody out there wants to talk more about this or any of the other things that we've touched on, just feel free to reach out.